Hey everyone, what you're looking at here is a drop of blood with lots of different things inside it. Not only are there red blood cells which carry oxygen and CO2, but let's see, we have some white blood cells and some platelets, little fragments that help with clotting blood. There are antibodies from our immune system to fight infections with the leukocytes. Let's see, oxygen, like I had mentioned. Our cells create waste, which is ammonia, that's floating around in our blood. There are hormones and lots of other different things that accumulate over time. And so what we're going to look at now are the vessels that are carrying these things. What do those vessels look like and what tasks fit their structure? So let's look at the big picture right now, the blood pathway. So if you orient yourself in the very middle, you can see the right side, oxygen poor, and the left side, oxygen rich. Up here are lungs, so this has to be our pulmonary artery, carrying blood to the lungs to be oxygenated in our pulmonary vein, carrying it back to the left atrium. So once blood is pumped out of the left atrium, it travels through arteries, and the major definition for an artery is that they carry blood away. And arteries get smaller and smaller and smaller, and they'll subdivide till eventually they become arterioles. And then at the very bottom here, arterioles subdivide into smaller and smaller capillaries. And by definition, a capillary is a vessel that's used for exchange. And in this picture, you can see that it's dropping off oxygen to those body cells and picking up carbon dioxide to change over from oxygen rich to oxygen poor. But eventually those capillaries will merge together to form small, tiny little veins called venules. Those venules will merge together to form veins, and by definition, if you are a vein, you are carrying blood to the heart. And the veins will all kind of merge together and deposit into the right atrium to start the whole process over again. That's the major pathway for our blood vessels. Now let's look at each one in a little bit more detail. The first, carrying blood away, are arteries. And remember, if you're an artery, you are built for high pressure flow, or even a high pressure pushing of blood. And so to do that, you have to have a very muscular walls, which are very thick, that can withstand high pressures. And in fact, arteries have this elastic recoil so that even when the heart is relaxed, there still maintains blood pressure. And as I mentioned, those arteries divide into arterioles, and then those arterioles divide into smaller capillaries. And what makes the capillaries so good at exchanging materials, so if I just draw in all different body cells here, oxygen will go in, nutrients will go in, etc., CO2 and waste will go out, is that the capillaries are only one cell thick, and they're so little that even microscopic little red blood cells, they have to line up, there's my little RBC, they have to line up single file to go through capillaries. So they're very, very tiny and specialized for their particular role. But then once the exchange has occurred, capillaries will merge together into venules, and venules will merge together into veins. To be a vein, as I had mentioned, you have to travel to the heart. Veins are built for a low pressure flow. And so to do that, they don't have to have very muscular walls. So they're very thin and not muscular. They don't have to be super high, built for high pressures anymore. But one unique feature of veins is the fact that they look like, or they have the same things as our heart chambers. They have valves that open and close, and they do the same things as those heart chambers in that they don't allow blood to flow backwards. Because if you imagine, if this is your calf muscle, your gastrocnemius, there's your Achilles tendon down here, gravity's working this way. So if you want blood to go against gravity, you have to have those valves so that blood doesn't flow and start to pool in your legs and your feet. And in fact, even the motion of walking and the movement of those muscles help to push on the blood to keep it going in the right direction in addition to the valves. So that's one pretty unique feature of veins that are not present in arteries. Now let's go back and recap the whole picture here. I think this is pretty neat micrograph picture of an artery and a vein. You can clearly see the thin walls of the vein and the very thick muscular walls of the artery. So if we start here in the artery, we're having oxygen-rich blood going in. It's going away from the heart. And you can see the thick muscle in the artery walls. That's smooth muscle. The arteries will subdivide into arterioles. Here are all of our capillaries, where we can have exchange of gases, and eventually those merge to venules. We have the thinner walled veins under low pressure, where oxygen poor blood is going back to the heart. So let's look at those different vessels and how they all blend together as one, essentially a long tube, and looking a little different and playing different roles depending on where in that canal or tube you are. Now, one final thing I do want to bring to your attention are some major arteries and major veins. So if we're talking about major arteries, we're talking about vessels that carry away from the heart. Obviously, we can't have this discussion without the aorta, the largest, and that's coming off of the left ventricle. And the pulmonary artery, that's the odd one where it's only carrying oxygen poor blood to the lungs. Coronary artery supplying the heart with blood and oxygen in that blood. Renal artery is associated with the kidneys, so essentially the aorta will run along the entire trunk of your body, and it'll subdivide off to the renal arteries. The carotid artery is the one you can feel your pulse with. Femoral artery is a major artery supplying your legs with blood. And then we have a series of arteries in the arm, starting with the subclavian that branches off the aorta into the shoulders, the brachial in the arm, and the radial, as in the radius, which is a major artery in your wrist. Now let's flip it here and look at the major veins. Again, we'll start with the biggest. We have the two vena cavas, the superior coming from above, the inferior coming from below. And then we have some that are analogous, whether you're an artery or vein. It just depends on which direction you're carrying blood. And in this case, veins are carrying two. So the pulmonary vein is going to carry oxygen rich. That's the one odd exception. Just like the femoral artery in your leg, the femoral vein is located in a very similar place. The same with the subclavian, renal artery, renal vein. The jugular vein is analogous to the carotid in your neck. But these two, both associated with the liver, have an interesting story. So, blood that's going to the liver that hasn't quite made it all the way back to the heart yet, it's going to stop here, and it's going to take the portal vein into the liver. And the reason being is that that blood that's entering the liver just picked up a boatload of nutrients from the small intestine. So it's going to go to the liver first. The liver gets first dibs at all the nutrients. Then what's left is going to take the hepatic vein from the liver. It's going to exit the liver and join up with the vena cavas and go back to the heart. So that's just a little detour within the liver, just because of where the liver is located and the small intestines where the nutrients are. So that's the major blood vessels and examples of those major vessels as well. Thanks for listening.